multifaceted cooperation in CIS, as well as will take stock of their interaction 2022. They plan to take some decisions in law enforcement, culture, humanitarian, and educational spheres. Some of them then will be submitted for subsequent approval of heads of state and government. The Russian Friendship University of Patrice Lumumba will receive a status of basic organization of CIS for training and retraining of journalists. On the 14th of April, the Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, will participate in the 6th meeting of foreign ministers of Russia and Central Asia. Republic of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, Republic of Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Republic of Uzbekistan will participate. It will take place in Samarkand. They'll speak about prospective directions of six-nation cooperation in politics, diplomacy, trade, economy, transport, energy, culture, and humanitarian sphere, as well as mechanisms for its effective implementation in line with the first summit Russia-Central Asia that took place on the 14th of October 2022 in Astana. During these events, there will be also bilateral meetings of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. We will inform you about this as we always do. You know the site of our foreign ministry and our accounts in social networks. Let's pass to the Ukrainian crisis, the 7th of April. It was 9 years since the Congress of Representatives of Administrative and Territorial Entities of the Donetsk Republic approved the Declaration on Sovereignty and Act on Proclamation of State independence of Donetsk People's Republics. They also took a decision on conducting a referendum on the 11th of May 2014 about self-determination of DPR. Everyone knows the results. A new republic appeared on the map. It went through a very complex way before it became internationally recognized. The DPR is intrinsically linked to Russia. That is why they decided to join Russian Federation as a result of the referendum in September 2022. You all know about these events, how everything was developing. The links will be presented in the text of today's briefing. Today in DPR, LPR, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, people return to peaceful life, despite everything that we hear from Kiev regime, from the regimes of the collective West. Peace will be there. People will live in peace according to the values defended by them, by their ancestors for years, for decades, for centuries. According to the Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, Marat Husnulin, in 2022, hundreds of kilometers of gas pipelines were built. An independent system of supply was created in Zaporizhia. In Mariupol, 11,000 houses were repaired. The statistics should also have some we should add some emotional information. All these roads, all these pipelines, all these buildings are built not just in complex conditions. They are built despite everything that is being implemented by those who were abusing people all these years. All these pipelines, roads, buildings, infrastructure, all of this is built, but we need to understand the risk to life of those who do this. We all know the site called Mirotvorets or Peacemaker, and there is a list with the potential victims of the Kiev regime. And a lot is being done against these people, and these people work against this terrible ideology. So when you hear about buildings, about schools, about kindergartens that are not being built there, remember it. I know personally people who work in the region that went there from Moscow region, from other regions of our country. They represent federal and regional bodies, municipal bodies. Now they are trying to help people return to peaceful life. This is how it is done. They don't think about their health or their lives, their circumstances. They're not thinking about their personal security and well-being. They think about the future of people, the future of all the regions. But first of all, we understand that when we speak about regions, we speak about people. These are not just numbers. These numbers represent history, the history of constructiveness, the history of countering destruction, the history of love, of being true, to traditional values. So just don't think that it's just statistics, just numbers. It's not like that. It's more than that. This year, the pace of building, as it was said, will increase. I'll repeat. The pace, kilometers, meters, square meters, cubic meters will increase, but the contribution will be more. As the work, the spiritual work implemented by the people, so that people in this region could feel in peace, in that they lived in prosperity. And we also need to remember all the people and generations of people who did everything for the peace in this region. The program of preferential mortgage at 2% starts in these regions. The government of Russia prepares a program to repair roadways, about 21,000 kilometers. In the nearest future, the situation with cell phone coverage will be improved. The water pipeline destroyed by UAF in 2014 for DPR is ready, and water supply will be started to Donetsk. Water, electricity is one more aim of the Kiev regime, of those who support it. We have spoken about this for many years. They stopped water supply. They put mines into the electric networks. But now it is obvious that those who did not support Kiev, the Kiev regime, would always live without electricity and water. Those who supported Kiev regime will live okay, in good conditions, and those who preserve traditional values will not have any future. On the 10th of April, we celebrated the 79th anniversary of liberation of Odessa from Nazi and Romanian occupants. Despite all the decades despite this, now the city again suffers from Nazism, but of Ukrainian origin. Neo-Nazis from Western Ukraine reign there. There are no mass events dedicated to this date. So there is no such date for those who live in Odessa. There is no such date in the history books. Do we not remember what was in the past? Do you not have any problems with your consciousness? So you can leave the songs of those times, about those events. You can glorify those who wrote these songs. But what are these songs about? Who are they dedicated to? People don't need to know how they were created. This is how it happens now. It should not be like that, and it will not be like that, because we will speak about this, we will remind about this. Despite the terror started by the authorities, the locals always remember who freed them from brown plague. These were the soldiers of the Red Army, and I'll remind once again, the soldiers of the Red Army did not have any differences. They did not divide themselves by religion or nationality. It was a multinational force. They were thinking of how to liberate themselves. their relatives, and not just relatives, but everyone, those people they didn't know, from the evil that was on our planet. We hope that they will get rid of oppression of Ukrainian neo-Nazis, will become free. And as Leonid Tosov sang, it will be again a sunny city by the Black Sea with blooming acacias. Another date is a tragical one. In 2 days, on the 14th of April, it will be 9 years since acting president of Ukraine, Turchinov, started an so-called anti-terrorist operation in Donbass. This was the start of violent suppression of the protest of the civilians in the region that decided to stand up against the government of national Nazi radicals. It was not just extremist, it was unlawful. It came to power because of unconstitutional armed coup d'etat in February 2014 in Kiev. It wasn't a national one, an internal one. It was external. Just remember how many foreign ministers of the European Union, of the US, were there during the so-called popular events at Maidan. Just remember what technological, material, informational assistance was given by the collective West, as well as by the integrational structures as the EU. Just remember how they together were singing songs. But in fact, they were dealing with political architecture, but I cannot tell this because this is something constructive, but they were destructing the foundations of statehood of Ukraine. They were destroying the essence of the society, of the state on the territory of Ukraine. They did it. Their money was used. They did it. They gathered all the people at Maidan. They created the symbols. They could do this only with great financial support. I will remind that the punitive operation that started there claimed lives of thousands of innocent people, including children and women. The West was not just silencing it, it was participating in it actively. It was observing what was helping, it was condoning, it was financing it, it was participating directly in it, then was just governing the relevant processes. After this step of the Kiev regime, it is obvious the handwheel of the bloody actions that was set in motion by junta in Donbass in 8 years made Russia start special military operation for denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine, and to eliminate of threats for this Russian security. The West continues to supply Ukraine with weapons, demands to continue hostilities. They don't think about victims. Anglo-Saxons do not hide that the variant of possible ceasefire is absolutely unacceptable for them. And they are saying that they are not party in the conflict. They are stressing it. And they are saying that they expect from Kiev decisive steps and readiness for massacre, as we understand, till the last Ukrainian. The direct military assistance of US to Ukraine steadily grows. It reached $35.8 billion. It's more than GDP indicators of Cyprus and Ireland, and it is comparable to the Estonian GDP. Most part of this money, around $35 billion, was allocated after the beginning of the special military operation. Kiev regime receives from Washington different types of heavy offensive weapons, ammunition, and gear. Bilateral military supplies are also provided by 28 of 31 NATO countries. It's more than 65 billion euros. The alliance keeps saying that the organization is not providing any direct military help to Kiev regime and is not a party in conflict, which what they're stressing every time. The structures of the bloc coordinate logistics, help to distribute Ukrainian requests for weapons, and they modernize UAF administration systems. They also gather intelligence, give this intelligence. So there are different ways of doing that. At the same time, NATO is also supplies so-called non-lethal materials in line with comprehensive assistance package to Ukraine and through trust funds. They implement projects for more than 500 million euros to give Kiev special means to fight drones, engineer pontoon equipment, fuel and lubricants, medicine, medical and fire trucks. Since 28 of February 2022, the EU, in fact, reoriented its European Peace Fund for supplying weapons to Ukrainian authorities. There were 7 tranches, and they allocated more than 3.7 billion euros. In less than a year, it exhausted the resources of the fund. They had to be used to increase security of all the regions of the world till 2027. Just imagine it. So the sum that was there and the sum that was spent for the actions in Ukraine, this money had to be used to support security in different regions of the world till 2027. On the 13th of March, the EU countries had to add money to the budget of the fund for more than 2 billion euros, and its volume reached almost 8 billion. They are going to provide UAF with artillery projectiles. So the money of EU taxpayers are going to be absorbed by Ukrainian black hole, as well as by US military-industrial complex. The main goal is to prolong hostilities on the European continent. The EU has allocated to Ukraine around 13 billion euros. They also train Ukrainian soldiers in line with the EU mission to support Ukraine. It assumed an obligation to train by the end of 2023 30,000 militants of UAF and neo-Nazi battalions. The weapons provided by the West, Ukrainian army and foreign mercenaries is used to kill civil population in DPR, LPR, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. Residential areas are subject to shellings, as well as the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and we all understand all the consequences and threats of a nuclear catastrophe. We have repeatedly sounded the alarm about the weapons that go to Ukraine, anti-craft, anti-tank complexes. Because of the corruption and in political and military circles, these weapons appears in other regional conflicts. It is used by criminals, by terrorist extremists in Europe, for instance, in this garden that José Borrell talks about. We need to understand that no one is going to stay aside. It creates threats for internal security for every state on the European continent, in particularly in the sphere of civil air traffic.
Well, that is simple and basic analytics, accessible to everyone. It's not hard to take a look at what happened after the occupation and aggression by the US. I'm talking about the anti-Iraqi coalition in Baghdad, what kind of terrorist attacks took place, what kind of weaponry was supplied, and what kind of terrorist organization came into being. The same goes to Libya, the same goes to the Arab Spring in general. We have all seen that. It looks like the Western regimes drew no conclusions from these mistakes. They didn't do any homework. On the 5th of April, New York hosted an informal session of the UNSC on the ARIA formula upon Russia's initiative on the separation of children from the Ukrainian refugees in Europe. I'm talking about the wonderful part of Europe, according to Joseph Borrell, and we see the atrocious situation there. The children are taken away by locals without any consent of families, and they do not want to give them back. In March 2022, Spain had accommodated 85 children with disabilities from orphanages in the DPR. 77 of them were later put in the Spanish orphanages, and we do not know anything about their fate. What about the forces that support the ICC and shout that this is the right way of dealing it? Don't they want to ask a question regarding these children? Everything that was told around notorious decisions that are not in line with any legal norms. Actually, you can get any information on any child, and at this venue, at the Foreign Ministry premises, we hosted a detailed conference of the Russian Children's Rights Commissioner, Maria Lvova-Belova. She described the situation, and she said that she's also ready to exchange information on the fate of any kid. Could you please tell me what kind of hypocrisy, blatant hypocrisy, are we talking about? Inhumane treatment of kids. Children are disappearing in the EU countries, and they are of interest to no one, either individually or en masse. They don't care about that. We talked about that. We provided quotes, and there were a plethora of these quotes that stipulate that official representatives, law enforcers, executive authorities of the EU countries directly stipulated that that was a real problem for them. Ukrainian citizens disappearing in their territories, children and women, because they are not registered anywhere, and after that they become victims of violence, trafficking, smuggling, and so on and so forth. No one in Brussels or Washington cares about that. But the answer to that question is simple, because they don't care about people at all. What they're interested in is to supply billions of dollars to capitalize on this situation, to get benefits. They are interested in destruction, because in this case they can pursue their policy without anybody being in their way. Such an attitude of the European states contradicts to everything. It contradicts traditional Christian values. And let me remind you that that is the framework of what has been taking shape in the European continent for over a century. This is at odds with human rights. This so-called new concept that appeared in the European continent in the 20th century. It has no other explanation other than what I have provided, and this is a complete neglect to the fate of the most vulnerable group of people, namely children. Ukraine continues to pursue oppressions against Orthodox priests. They are being treated and horribly and abused. Lately, there's been a video on the internet with the beating of Bishop Nikita. And the most atrocious thing is that local authorities are encouraging such an attitude. They encourage bullying. Law enforcers do not bring to justice a culprit who is quite visible on the video, and it all gives to the Ukrainian neonazis, a sense of impunity. Unfortunately, sectoral international organizations, including UNESCO, the OSCE, as well as the international community, do not condemn crimes against Orthodox Church, and the pinnacle of cynicism was the response by the US State Department. I believe that that is a rare case when the comment of the US spokesman drew attention of millions of people worldwide. Let me remind you that he claimed that he heard nothing about the persecution against Orthodox priests and seizures of cathedrals by the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. and maybe he could comment it on that, but later on. But despite all the attempts by the collective West and its Kiev protégés to harm Russia at all costs, the special military operation will go on until the tasks set by the Russian leadership are completed. I have another date, memorable date. The 12th of April marks 240 years since the Crimean Peninsula joined the Russian state. This date, in 1783, Empress Catherine II issued a manifesto on the accession of the peninsula of Crimea, the Taman Peninsula, and the Kuban part on its accession into the Russian Empire. The importance of this manifesto is hard to overrate. The peninsula of Crimea was returned to Russia, and this comes from the aspiration to ensure security of southern borders of Russia, to resolve important tasks, to further strengthen political, military, and economic might of the Russian Empire. Crimea's accession to Russia took place upon request of the citizens of the peninsula. Russian archives still have the so-called letters of allegiance. These are documents where the citizens of Crimea swore allegiance to Russia, and probably this was one of the most democratic forms of gaining new territories at that age. The people of Crimea were granted equal rights to compared to other nationalities, and this helped preserve their culture and identity. Immediately after its accession to the Novorossiya governorate, the Crimea started developing industrial and agricultural potential, and it has become a favorite resort destination to many generations of our compatriots. Given its strategic geographic situation, the peninsula has been targeted by aggressors more than once. Those who have not seen these sites, Sevastopol, Kerch, I advise you to come there, not just read about it, and you will feel this history. Locals will tell you about it. You will learn a lot from the monuments, and you will simply understand how many generations of our compatriots and ancestors fought for these lands. They fought till their death so that this land could not be subjected to the desecration that happened to it. Given its strategic geographic situation, as I've already mentioned, many had this desire to get Crimea. Let me remind you that Crimea is home to the city that is legendary, steeped in valor and glory of the Russian warriors. I'm talking about the city of Sevastopol, and the heroic courage of Crimeans is proved by the fact that Crimea has two hero cities, Sevastopol and Kerch. Crimea is part of our country, which was confirmed by the referendum on the 16th of March 2014. Back in the day, the citizens of Crimea made a deliberate choice to join Russia. Taking into account the importance of Crimea joining Russia, in 2018, the date of 19th of April was included in the official list of the military glory days of Russia. Upon the initiative of the Republic of Crimea and with the support of the Russian Historical Society, the Post of Russia will issue a stamp sheet dedicated to 240 years since the signing of this manifesto. I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to congratulate all Crimeans and all the citizens of Russia. Let me assure you that Crimea will always be part of Russia. These are not just mottos, words. This is a daily, meticulous effort, the spiritual one as well. Basically, that is what the citizens of Crimea voted for in March 2014. Let's get down to other matters. On the 11th of April, at the line of contact between Azerbaijan and Armenia, an armed incident took place. Unfortunately, there were fatalities and casualties. representatives of the armed forces and border control services of Russia immediately contacted responsible persons in Armenia and Azerbaijan and took measures to de-escalate the situation. What happened confirms once again the need for Baku and Yerevan to exercise mutual restraint and to strictly abide by the trilateral agreements between the leaders of Russia, Azerbaijan and Armenia. A few words on Saudi Arabia being granted the SCO dialogue partner status. The finalizing of the interstate procedures by Saudi Arabia under the memorandum on the partner status became another step to strengthen joint potential of the mutual win-win safe development and strengthening connectivity on our broad space that brings together the SCO family countries. We are positive that the active effort to implement this document that comes into force will create additional opportunities for our interaction in ensuring regional security and stability, primarily to curb threats and challenges related to terrorism, extremism, drug trafficking, trans-border organized crime, illegal activities in ICTs. New prospects for trade and economic investment cooperation will open up for transport infrastructure and logistic connectivity as well, implementing projects in energy, agriculture, telecom, and other areas of mutual interest, promoting intercivilizational dialogue, deepening humanitarian ties, namely on cultural, educational, scientific, and technical tracks. For its part, Russia reaffirms its readiness to actively help Saudi Arabia and other SCO dialogue partners to make use of the opportunities provided by the organization to have a stable and confident national development. As you know, today we celebrate the World Cosmonauts Day. On the 12th of April 1961, Soviet citizen Senior Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin was the first to complete one orbit of Earth, traveling in the Vostok 1 capsule. It heralded an age of manned space missions. Instantly, he has become world famous, and basically he has become the citizens of the world. The launch of the first manned spacecraft is a triumph of Soviet space, of Soviet science, and I believe that this day we should remember all those who made dreams come true. The Vostok launch was administered by rocket systems designer Sergei Korolev, head of the Baikonur test range Kirillov, rocket engineer Leonid Voskresensky. On the 9th of April 1962, the Soviet Union decided that this will be the Cosmonautics Day, and it received international status at the Conference of the International Aviation Federation in 1968. Incidentally, since 2018, it has another name, the International Day of Human Space Flight. On the 7th of April 2011, upon Russia's initiative, the special session of the UNGA adopted an official resolution to mark 50 years since this development. The Russian Federation is a successor to the Soviet Union, and we take a principled stance when it comes to the development of space programs. Our country is working to adopt joint statements with other countries on no first placement of weapons in outer space. And by doing so, we try to make space a weapon-free zone, space for peace and cooperation. We try to focus on the development of civil technology. The best way to describe Russian position on space is to quote Yuri Gagarin. After flying around the Earth in a capsule, I saw how wonderful our planet is. People, let us cherish and multiply this beauty and not destroy it. End of quote. These are grand words of a unique person. In order to preserve this beauty and multiply it, we need culture, basically, that is composed of the very best from the civilization. On the 15th of April, Russia and many other countries celebrate International Culture Day. It is linked with the adoption of the Treaty on the Protection of Artistic and Scientific Institutions and Historic Monuments in 1935. In international legal terms, this document is known as the Warwick Pact. by the name of its author, an outstanding Russian artist and philosopher Nikolai Roerich. The document played an important role in shaping international law standards in culture, and it set the ground for developing universal international legal acts aimed at protecting the legacy and preserving world cultural diversity within the UNESCO, including 1954 Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict, Convention on the Means of Prohibiting and Preventing the Illicit Import, Export and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property of 1970, the Convention concerning the Protection of the World Cultural and National Heritage of 1972. Let me remind you that Russia is party to all the mentioned international treaties, and it is living up to its obligations bona fide. The Russian culture is a part and parcel of the global cultural heritage. Our culture is rich, is unique, creative, highly spiritual. It serves an important tool for cooperation and international dialogue. We're open to cultural and humanitarian interaction with all those who respect and understand our country, its history, traditions, language, and achievements in the area of art. At the same time, lately, we have been seeing an unparalleled level of xenophobia. We call it Russophobia in a number of Western countries. That turns into blatant discrimination and cancel culture. They coin various terms, not propaganda, but strategic communications. That's a quite beautiful language, but the crux of the matter is the same. That is hatred packed into some colorful package, but inside it is destruction. What do they want to destroy? They want to destroy what they created themselves, what they cannot comprehend and understand, let alone study, and they all decided to cancel it all. On the other hand, when they do not know what to cancel, they even don't name the artists, the grand composers. They forgot how to go to museums en masse. But if they visit museums, they just do it out of curiosity, because it's a habit or like a part of a business project. It is all obvious. Culture and art have become an art business. Everything is turned from something spiritual and genuine into something instant that could perish, and business projecting like. Why don't they try to cancel us? But that is not possible. We have repeatedly stated that, and that has been understood by all those who even had some doubts. Last year, the collective West basically unleashed a war against the Russian culture. Many years of partner relations have been severed. Politically charged betterment of national identity of Russian artists have been ongoing. They changed the names of artworks, the nationality of artists. They dismantled monuments, but that is nothing new. They have been doing it for decades. They make attempts to erase any manifestations of historical memory related to our country.
We not just doubt the level of culture and morality that they say they have, our ex-partners. It's more terrible, it's more complex. We're talking about the lack of humanity. It's not just about what some nations support. They are rejecting basic values of humanity. It's a more dramatic, more complex situation. It's not just a political campaign against our country. On the 3rd of April, there was the 20th meeting of the Ministries of Culture of the SCO. Vladimir Asintsev, Deputy Culture Minister, took part in it. National Museum of India opened a digital exhibition dedicated to common Buddhist heritage of SCO countries. It exhibits objects from the collection of the State Museum of Oriental Art. I'm talking about a Russian museum. India is a president of SCO, and it is implementing many projects in humanitarian cultural sphere, film festival SCO 27th, 31st of January, cultural exhibition of SCO, and the context of craft festival, Sarajukund 2023, from the 3rd to the 19th of February, international conference about common cultural heritage of SCO, 14th, 15th of March, as well as the program of tourist and cultural capital of SCO. As you know, this honorary status for 2022-2023 was given to Varanasi in India. The parties supported the suggestion of Kazakhstan of declaring Almaty the next tourist and cultural capital of SCO. The final decision about the status will be taken during the meeting of the Council of the Heads of SCO. It continued other events of different of a wide range of cooperation. We're talking about the meeting of Security Council secretaries in New Delhi on the 29th of March, Supreme Court presidents in New Delhi the 10th and 12th of March, the Minister of Finance, heads of central banks on the 3rd of March, Ministers of Energy on the 14th of March, heads of ministries responsible for physical culture and sports in New Delhi to 15th of March, as well as the meeting of heads of tourist administrations in Varanasi on the 17th of March. We note productive dynamic efforts of Indian presidency for strengthening multi-sectoral interaction and SCO for security and sustainable development in the region. There is stress on humanitarian topic for inter-civilization and dialogue, strengthening contact between nations, and to form the space of mutual understanding, friendship, and trust in the region. Several topics about culture. Since the 5th to the 7th of April, the oldest Russian center in Europe, the Russian center is in Belgrade, celebrated its 90th anniversary. It is opened in 1933 by the initiative of Russian Cultural Committee with the support of King Alexander I, Kara-Georgievich. It was the Russian house named after Nikolai II. It was the center for Russians who lost their motherland after the tragic events of 1970s. On the occasion of the anniversary, the Russian House opened an exhibition dedicated to Russian emigration in the kingdom of Serbians, Croatians, and Slovenians, future Yugoslavia. Exposition includes archive materials, digitalized documents, unique objects of art from the leading museums of Russia and Serbia, as well as from private collections. The Archive of Serbia gave to the Russian Center a book of visitors, which demonstrates that representatives of Russian immigration, for instance, Fyodor Shalapin, visited the house. The medal of the Minister of the Culture of the Russian Federation, great Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky, this is the name of the medal, was given to famous Serbian film director Emir Kusturica. Serbian historian, ex-ambassador of Serbia to Moscow, Slavenko Terzic, became a foreign member of Russian Science Academy. A Serbian Post presented the mark 90 years since the establishment of the Russian House. Different people, representatives of the embassy of Russia, Trudnichestvo, for instance, Evgeny Primakov, as well as the director of the Department on Humanitarian Cooperation of the Foreign Ministry, Alexander Alimov, official representatives of Russia and Serbia, as well as cultural and art figures were at this meeting. As well, would like to speak about the exhibition about Sergei Rachmaninov in Paris. We continue celebrating 150th anniversary of his birthday. It's one of the memorable dates of UNESCO for this year. The events are dedicated to life and work of this legendary musician, and people are sincerely interested in Russian culture, and they visited this exhibition. It was opened on the 7th of April. It was prepared by Russian National Museum of Music with the support of the Russian Culture Ministry. It is based on the materials that in different times were provided by relatives and close friends of the composer. These documents were provided to museum. The project is presented in French language. It tells about Rachmaninoff as about composer, piano player, and conductor. Most part of the exhibition is multimedia content. Visitors can listen to archive recordings of the works of Sergei Rachmaninoff performed by himself and other musicians. The day before, there was a roundtable discussion in Russian House in Paris about family, about teachers, about friends, his heritage in Russia and abroad. General Director of the Russian National Museum of Music, Mikhail Brizgalov, spoke about that. Several important other events, for instance, the Independence Day of Zimbabwe on the 18th of April. On the 1980s, first democratic general election was celebrated in the country. This country has gone through a complex way of overcoming acute social economic problems, consolidation in a society to preserve internal political stability, defending their position on key issues of global and regional agenda. We highly appreciate traditionally friendly nature of our relations with Zimbabwe. They are based on mutual respect, consideration of mutual interests. Moscow and Harare are actively developing political dialogue. We are successfully continuing to interact on international arena, increase cooperation in trade, economy, humanitarian, and other spheres. We congratulate our Zimbabwean friends on their national holiday, and we sincerely wish the people of Zimbabwe well-being and prosperation and all the best. On the 18th of April, there will be one more event. It's a very important date. We're going to celebrate an international day of monuments and sites. It was established by the International Council on Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, and it was approved by the General Conference of UNESCO on its 22nd session. Every year, its structure and its national committees organize events and actions to draw the attention to a very important humanitarian problem to protect and preserve world cultural heritage for future generations. All those who were speaking about canceling our culture, how are they going to participate and how are they going to interact with these structures? How can we imagine that? We need to preserve world culture for future generations, but, well, at the same time, we are going to cancel something that does not correspond to the ideas of some people. The topic of this celebration will be heritage in changing world. Russia is an active and responsible participant of different documents in this sphere: the Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflicts, Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage. There are 31 World Heritage Sites in Russia, 20 monuments. There is also a list of 32 candidates for including in this list. As a member of the Committee on the World Heritage of UNESCO, this is a leading organ of the Convention 1972, Russia pays attention to the development of international cooperation to preserve and for sustainable administration of these objects on professional and depoliticized foundation. In line with the Hague Convention and the order of Defense Minister of Russia, the actions are taken to preserve World Heritage sites like museums, regional and culture institutions in Ukraine. However, some countries, with the connivance of their elder brothers in Washington and Brussels, are violating international law, neglecting their obligations to preserve culture and historical heritage, and they're showing off their unlawful actions. We see what happens. Monuments are demolished. Religious buildings are being demolished. In February 2014, the West brought to power in Ukraine neo-Nazis, and the process of violent forced derussification started in Ukraine. They're eliminating everything that connects the country with Russia and the Soviet Union. Almost all the monuments of the Soviet era were demolished. Monuments to Vladimir Lenin, to whom Ukraine owes its existence. Ukrainian radicals dismantled memorials to the soldiers of the Red Army that fought Nazis and their Ukrainian henchmen. They even destroyed graves of Soviet soldiers, gravestone of Nikolai Vatutin, who liberated Kiev, also was affected. It's a disease. We cannot stop it. We cannot make exceptions. We need to wait till it is cured, and I'm sure it will happen. And we are doing everything to do that. Monuments to writers, to poets, politicians, commanders, educators were destroyed. One of the most terrible acts of vandalism. I cannot find a word for this. Destruction, demolishment. I'm talking about the monument to Catherine the Great, Peter I, Alexander Suvorov, Alexander Pushkin, Leo Tolstoy, and many others. It is not just illogical, it is not just barbarian. They forgot that these monuments presented higher artistic value. They are fighting Pushkin on the territory of Ukraine, and they have been doing it for a long time. This is a mythical enemy that they have to defeat. But at the same time, monuments present cultural heritage. They not just represent someone, they by themselves are also a work of art. They continue this war with monuments. Neo-Nazi Kiev regime deprives people on Ukraine from their history, distorting rich culture. They replace this culture with narrow-minded nationalism soaked in Russophobia. But you understand that nothing will change the fact that all the history of the territories that were part or now are part of the Ukrainian state are intrinsically linked to Russian history, and we cannot rewrite it. In Poland, it is just a part of state policy. According to the national legislation, local bodies had to eliminate by the 31st of March 2018 communist symbols that were in their territory, including Soviet monuments, aside from burial sites. This campaign was started, and there were 561 objects of the Soviet military memorial heritage. They were in the list that was made in 1997 with the Polish authorities, and now just only around 100 of them. Soviet memorials and cultural objects are being demolished in the Baltic states. They used the events in Ukraine, and there was also a legal framework created for this. Latvia, violating Article 13 of bilateral intergovernmental agreement on the social protection of military pensioners of 1994, has eliminated more than 120 Soviet monuments. In Estonia, more than 60. In Lithuania, around 30. They're using an absurd pretext of glorification of Russian imperialism. This is that they have created. They also want to demolish monuments to culture figures, scientists, and commanders that are located in city parks. if we're talking about UN, OCO, UNESCO, we are acting against these barbarian actions. But the deafening silence of international structures is going to have the most negative consequence, because in fact they are justifying the destruction of the heritage. And why do we need OSCE if it doesn't react to this? Yes, there are some security issues, but there is no security if the organization hasn't noticed it. Well, so there are options for instance, to act on this issue, but no one says anything. If we're talking about human rights, no one says anything. In fact, OSCE is canceling itself. Since the 20th to the 20th of April, the 45th Moscow Film Festival is going to take place. It is one of the oldest and most important film festivals. It was started in 1935. The geography of countries participating in it is very wide. There will be films from 65 countries of all the regions of the world. China will present 23 films in different programs of the festival. France 18. Spain 15, US 12, India and Iran 10, Mongolia 2. There will be more than 30 international premieres at the festival. Many of the films presented at the film festival are dedicated to social economic problems of youth and the necessity to overcome generation gap. The jury of the contest will be headed by Indian filmmaker Rahul Ravel. The president for the jury for documentaries will be Chinese director Hao Yun. As for short films, it will be Italian director, screenwriter, and actor Giorgio Cugno. The film Balfinch by Boris Khlebnikov will open the film festival. At the end, at the closure of the festival, the film 42 Seconds by Alex Morel and Dani Lauredane will be shown. It is a sports drama created by Spain and France about Olympic Games in 1992 in Barcelona. On the 21st of April, it will be 20 years since the signing of Declaration on the Principles of Friendly Partnership between Russian Federation and Indonesia in the 21st century. It created a basis for bilateral cooperation for long term. We reached a qualitatively new level. Contacts at the highest level are regular. Leaders of Indonesia have visited our country 4 times. President of the Russian Federation has visited the archipelago twice. We systematically have contacts, reconcile ours on international bilateral topics. During 2022, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Indonesian counterpart Retno Marsudi have met 4 times on the sidelines of international forums. There is a wide range of issues of mutual interest. They are discussed constructively in a business-like manner during consultations between foreign ministries. We have productive interparliamentary dialogue. We have contacts between different cultural and religious organizations, scientific organizations. We are also working on strengthening legal basis for Russian-Indonesian relations. It gave impetus to our economic ties. Indonesia is one of our main partners. If we're talking about ASEAN countries, in 2022, bilateral turnover increased almost by 45%, reaching $4.79 billion. We implement several big projects in minerals production and processing. Russian-Indonesian Joint Commission on Trade, Economic and Technical Cooperation functions successfully. We also speak about agreement between Eurasian Economic Union and Indonesia. In current geopolitical conditions, the provisions of declaration about Russia and Indonesia relations based on mutual respect and equality are very important. That It's very important to facilitate stable world order.
A common approach to global issues allows our countries to efficiently interact within the United Nations and other multilateral platforms to deepen our cooperation within ASEAN-Russia strategic partnership. We are happy to note that Russia-Indonesia interaction is moving forward in line with the framework principles and guidelines shaped 20 years ago. On the 24th of April, the international community will celebrate the Diplomacy Day. This is a memorable date that was established upon Venezuela's initiative. As the chair of the non-alignment movement, it reminds that it is necessary to move away from the Cold War and zero-sum game mindset. Undoubtedly, amid degradation of the international security and undermining of trust due to the destructive actions by the US and its satellites, member states should take all the efforts for the spirit of solidarity to gain the upper hand over egoistic, selfish, unilateral approaches. Russia is ready to such an endeavor. It is emblematic that this day Russia plans to organize open debates of the UN Security Council on the topic efficient multilateralism by protecting the principles of the UN Charter. This will be one of the central focal events of our chairmanship in April. The main goal of the session is to provide member states an opportunity to reaffirm their strict commitment to the key provisions of the UN Charter, primarily the ones that have to do with the sovereign equality of states and abandoning interference into domestic affairs. Besides that, amid an aggressive course by the collective West that wants to subdue the organization to its vested interests, it is necessary to send a clear message to support a depoliticized nature of the UN activities, which remains an indispensable platform as of now to search for collective answers to global issues. On the 24th of April 1963, the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations was opened for signing. This is the very document that we make reference to so often. We believe that the convention is one of the most important practical tools in the international law. Over the past years, it has become universal. It has helped a lot in consular work in the overwhelming majority of states of the world. We highlight an important idea enshrined in the convention, that it is contributed to the development of friendly relations among nations. At the same time, lately, a number of states unfriendly to Russia have been acting in a way that undermines the convention and erodes its unifying nature. They erode certain provisions of the convention. For instance, Article 2 on the size of the consular staff, Article 23 on persons declared non grata. In order to justify mass expulsions of our consular staff, at the same time, authorities of these states turn a blind eye to their commitments to take measures to protect consular premises, to guarantee their immunity and protection, including from the acts of vandalism. Unfortunately, such unfriendly steps impact adversely the opportunity to efficiently implement one of the most important consular functions, namely to protect the compatriots' interests in the host country. Hopefully, by joining hands, we'll be able to multiply the constructive experience that was accumulated over the past years to manage consular relations and to help unlock its potential for the decades to come. With that, I'm ready to take your questions. International Life, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Earlier this week, Foreign Minister of Germany demanded that countries that host sporting events should not issue visas for Russian athletes. And I quote, countries that host key sporting events can do something against the decisions of the International Olympic Committee. If we organize an international contest in Germany, we could act accordingly, and we will stick to our clear position. That's what she said. How would you comment on that? Certainly, that is nothing short of another infringement on the independence of sport. and it is inadmissible to have any bias in this area and an attempt to harm our country amid total sanctions that were imposed against our country in the area of sports purely for political reasons. Such actions of Western officials are at odds with the framework and the fundamental values of the Olympic movement. The main of them is to ensure by all countries and to ensure to all countries and to all athletes an equal access to competition, and naturally ensure the principle that sport should be out of politics. When I hear and read these statements, and there are quite a number of them, sometimes it is said by some illiterate people that believe that they can comment on this without any fundamental knowledge. Well, let's leave it aside, but that is a problem of the past centuries. But I hear such statements by officials, by ministers, by representatives of regimes, or at times sports experts that have some official posts. When they start saying something of this sort, I want to ask them, have you read the documents that you signed? It's not just some literature, but these are documents that manage the area of sports. The fact that Russia might not participate in key international competition lowers the bar, the competition bar. Without Russian athletes, international tournaments lose their appeal, lose their allure, and I'm not talking only about the athletes, but also the audience. You cannot expect a serious competition and fight, because that is the main part of sports area. For its part, Russia remains an open and hospitable country. We can host international competitions at the highest level. We participate in significant international competitions with the environment of friendship, fair play, and solidarity. We are always happy to host competition and welcome athletes who stand for the sport without artificial restrictions and discrimination. Such people as the Interior Ministry of Germany, well, this is just shameful. It's shameful not just to hear and to listen to that. It's just shameful for them to say that. Since you have no further questions, do have RT Russia Today. Alexander Morozov, if I may, I have two questions. Hello. The Washington Post claims that Polish and Ukrainian authorities could be involved in the explosions at the Nord Stream gas pipelines. At the same time, the same article stipulates that NATO countries are not interested in getting to the crux of the matter. In your view, how serious can we be about these versions that appear in Western media outlets? And what's your take on the possible US involvement that was described by Seymour Hersh? Listen, a terrorist attack took place. Maybe other countries have their own assessment, but we provided our own assessment. An extremist action took place that undermined civil infrastructure of crucial importance. I'm talking about civil infrastructure of peaceful nature, as I've already mentioned. They declared an investigation between the countries, inside the countries, as you have heard. This was made not to engage other countries to determine the truth, to have more opportunities to determine the truth, but to understand what position they take and who they are siding against. There was a lack of progress whatsoever and I'm talking about the investigation by Western countries, they're constantly hushing and they make some indecent slip of the tongue